Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, August 14th, 2026. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, asking you to go to Apple and give us a glowing 5-star review, as Rich Lowry says. And if you don't do that, if you don't want to give us a glowing 5-star review, please forget I said anything. Go to YouTube, like and subscribe. Do the things that indicate to the world that you are a listener or a watcher of the Commentary Podcast, and more people will join you because that's how the algorithm works. And we, of course, are slaves to the algorithm. And by we, I mean executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Fellow slave to the algorithm, senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And functioning with her own website news source that must trick the algorithm into exposing itself, Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, John.
So that's enough about the algorithm. I just want to point out that the news story that I think is the most haunting of the last 24 hours is the revelation that in his time as a Detroit city official in charge of, among other things, animal shelters, Abdul El-Sayed presided over a system in which 20% of all the dogs in the United States that were euthanized by shelters were in Detroit shelters. And Detroit has like 0.1% of the population of the United States or something like that. So 20% of the dogs killed by the government, killed under Abdul El-Sayed's watch. I don't know how this can be used politically. I have some thoughts about things that we've published. We published a really wonderful piece. This is about Iran, which of course is a Persian country, not an Arab country, but they're about how Iranians and the Shia are very anti-dog. They consider dogs unclean animals, and therefore, when they often liken Jews to dogs, and that is to make the case that the Jews are uniquely disgusting because they're similar to dogs. I don't know whether something like that is functioning with Mr. I will always abide by Sharia law, Abdul El-Sayed, but it can't be dismissed.
Well, I mean, Americans love dogs too, so I don't know. I don't know how much.
Like canceling Christmas or canceling Thanksgiving. He's killing dogs. The man killed dogs. Remember, we had the whole eating dogs. We had the whole eating dogs thing. You were saying about the football. He hates football.
He hates football, fireworks, bacon, and dogs.
I mean, it's just the whole question of whether or not, people vote for politicians because the politicians are like them, or they think, that it's someone I could have a beer with, or somebody who has the same interests or concerns that I do. When you got a guy, right, who doesn't like holidays, doesn't like fireworks, doesn't like football, doesn't like Mackinac Island, and kills dogs, you got a pretty fertile field of otherness there. And while we are, of course, not supposed to target the other, because the other is just as good as we are, we of course do, and we do consider how much politicians reflect our values and our principles. And if you are a dog lover who believes in no kill shelters and things like that, you're not going to like Abdul El-Sayed, who is, according to the first batch of polling, running behind Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate, opposing him in the senatorial race. Not by a huge amount, but in at least one of these polls, Rogers is above 50%, which is always considered sort of like a golden place to be in polling. If you can hit 50% or higher, you obviously, if that follows to election day, you win. And so, since polls are often much more ambiguous about that, and there are way more people who haven't decided who they'll vote for. And so there's a big undecided number usually in polling. This one may have been a push to make sure that people said yes, yay or nay to Rogers or El-Sayed. And so therefore it captures a larger number than maybe would be accurate. But he has a hill to climb. And the things that are coming out about him, one wonders what will come out about him that will be good, like that will make people in Michigan think, oh, I like that guy, who don't already share his politics and his general political valence. And Eliana, we task you with the ongoing effort to reveal the many ways in which Abdul El-Sayed, the worst and most anti-Semitic major candidate ever to run for public office, why that also should make him an other that that Americans shouldn't vote for.
No pressure. No pressure.
Well,
just the most important Senate election in maybe decades.
Yeah.
But the beacon is on it. I thought you were going to say with after reporting out so many things not to like about him, finding things that we can like about him, which is not our focus. But our reporting on him goes back to the first blockbuster piece that was a recording of his internal campaign call, where he said, "I will not celebrate the fact that the Ayatollah is dead because so many Muslims in Michigan are sad," which shows you where his bread is buttered among his constituents in that state. To yesterday's piece, he is totally representative of the public health establishment in this country, where he's out on his podcast warning people that bacon is a carcinogen, which is technically true, but he's comparing it to plutonium and trying to act like these things are on the same level. And, he's just things that average Americans cringe at and don't believe. I'm sure if you eat bacon 3 times a day, 365 days a year, it reminded me of that documentary where that Morgan, whoever, ate McDonald's forever. Yeah. Ate McDonald's every single day. But that, he does represent the public health establishment as well, even though he's not an actual doctor. He's never been certified to treat patients. But that's who this guy is. And then, of course, our friend Andrew Kaczynski at CNN.
It's only a problem, by the way, if you enrich the bacon to 60%.
60% nitrite, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Andrew Kaczynski, you were saying.
Yeah, he had found that El-Sayed went and deleted. And this is when that they know their views aren't popular when they go and scrub their Twitter feed. And in this case, he went and scrubbed his YouTube feed of videos where he's saying he doesn't like football and he doesn't like fireworks and he doesn't think the 4th of July should be celebrated as a holiday. It's just hard for me to see this flying in, outside of New York City.
I just want to point out that this is Eliana's mandate and her writ. Eliana,
this is our baby.
Eliana did a podcast that I loved with our friend Chris Starwell called Ink Stained Wretches. And I'm going to tell a behind-the-scenes story about Eliana, Chris, and Ink Stained Wretches, which is that Ink Stained Wretches every week had a feature where the press, which was the subject of attack on Ink Stained Wretches, there was one segment that Chris insisted on having where you had to say something nice about something in the media. And that it's not you. It's just not you, Eliana.
Not my forte. It was really hard to do.
You could hear the pain in Eliana's voice as she tried to find one thing. And Chris was always finding a great story about, a fireman who saved a puppy from a tree, only to be killed by Abdul El-Sayed, of course.
It's just not my focus. I am animated by rage, hatred.
What you are animated by is the need to correct the overwhelming consensus of the mainstream media seeking to deliver the United States into the hands of its
The
enemies. So,
Islamo-leftist.
pretty much, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's Abdul El-Sayed and the dogs. I don't know what Mike Rogers is going to do with this, but and how to handle it. But that's not my. That's how to be a salesman in negative campaigning is not anything that I have studied or been involved in. So that leaves us.
Well, where's Gail Collins? She's the dog columnist. When Romney ran, she ran 37 columns on poor Seamus. So that's what we need. Gail Collins, a lonely
I'm
public.
sure they're rushing out to Michigan to investigate, Seth. The Times is on it. Don't worry.
Gail Collins, of course, retired from her perch at the New York Times, thus indicating, raising the IQ level of the New York Times op-ed page by the average IQ level, which has of course now been lowered because of the departure of Ross Douthat, who of course had an IQ many hundreds of points higher than Gail Collins's. Okay, so we have a lot of developments in the world of academic responses to minorities and anti-Semitism. 3 or 4 different schools, all things from dropping at once this week. Eliana, you want to sort of like help us through, sort through these different threads?
Sure. I think there are 3 stories, or 4 actually, it's worth talking about. The first is that Haverford College, a small liberal arts school, I believe in Pennsylvania, settled. Is that right?
Yeah, it's okay. Just outside Philadelphia. Yeah.
Okay. So Haverford College settled a lawsuit, and we don't know the terms of the settlement, but one can imagine it's for a lot of money, with a group of Jewish students who charged that the school violated their civil rights. And in the wake of October 7th, Haverford did things like discourage Jewish students from holding a memorial because they knew it would be overrun with violent protests. It had issued statement after statement after statement after statement, like all these other schools, and then, said nothing after October 7th. So that's one story, and we should talk about the performance of Haverford College president Wendy Raymond on Capitol Hill. The second is that a federal judge tossed out the federal government's anti-discrimination case against Harvard. And the third is that the Civil Rights Division under Harmeet Dillon found that Duke Law School, despite the Supreme Court ruling, continues to discriminate on the basis of race in its admissions. And that's based on internal documents and admission statistics. And admission statistics in a lot of these settlements with the government are precisely what the government is pushing for. Even though they're going after these schools for discriminating against Jews, the federal government, in its agreement with Columbia and other schools, has said, we want your admission statistics. And I think it is in large part because they know that these schools have intentionally found closely related proxies for race, and we can now see it with Duke. And I made some notes on the specifics, but they've continued behaving with just the way they've done before. The fourth story would be University of Michigan dropping grades for incoming freshmen, half of the freshmen in the School of Arts and Sciences, that I think is worth talking about because it's such a disservice for those students. I think we've mentioned it before, but those are the stories. So maybe we start with Haverford.
Let's start with Haverford. So Haverford, of course, a Quaker school on the main line of Philadelphia, very, very high end, very hard to get into, very exclusive, very leftist, beautiful campus, by the way, very leftist politics, traditionally, historically, bad on Israel from decades ago. I know a friend of all of ours, who had a son who went to Haverford and spent I'm talking about in the teens, and spent 4 years battling BDS, hostile gestures toward the Hillel and whatever. So this is a problem of the discomfort of Jews at Haverford is a problem of long standing. But uniquely, it was one of those schools that had a unique quality after October 7th, which was that they actually explicitly, as you mentioned, said, do not do something. We don't want you to do something, you Jews altogether. Don't do it. You're going to damage the good working order of our campus by having a memorial for the murdered on October 7th. That was a pretty radical step. The only thing I can think of to compare, and it was a sort of moment of crisis, was when there was a threat at Cornell to sort of phoned in threat or whatever to Jewish students, the Jewish dining hall, and the administration advised Jewish kids not to congregate or not to go to the dining hall or something like that. Then they caught they caught the person who made the threat, who is now in I think in jail for 10 years. But that was the only other case that I could think of where it was that explicit at Haverford.
And
Haverford told the basketball team was having an anti-Semitism awareness night, and Haverford told them to cancel it, which is like, I mean, could you possibly have a better metaphor for what the colleges went through with anti-Semitism than scheduling an anti-Semitism awareness night, forcing the team to cancel anti-Semitism awareness night because of the anti-Semites who were expected to disrupt anti-Semitism awareness night?
Boy, that's head spinning.
That's the same thing that happened with the vigil. That's why they wanted the vigil canceled afterwards, the memorial event.
Right.
And you can see how this happened when you look at the testimony in May of 2025, not that long ago, just over a year ago, of Wendy Raymond, Haverford's president, who went up to Capitol Hill with literally Biden-style note cards, like 36-point print. And I want to read because it's exactly, the actual words are unbelievable. The note cards reminded her when she was testifying about these things to think, breathe, and remember body posture, but also not to equivocate essentially about whether it's bad to call for the extermination of the Jews. The note card said, calls for genocide, arrow, yes, abhorrent, violates our policies. The note card explained, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, had become a dog whistle used to, quote, intimidate or harass Jewish students. In response to questions about foreign policy, she was to say, quote, leave that to the expert, because she was, quote, focused on making Haverford the best college I can. Well, you failed. Sorry.
These
You failed.
these consultants who were hired to help these university presidents, manage their way through these hearings.
White shoe lawyers.
It is fantastic. I mean, imagine the amount of money they build. And the fact is that like 4 out of the 5 of them are no longer in their jobs. Claudine Gay had one. Manoush Safik had one at Columbia. Wendy Raymond is leaving her job. There's somebody else. I mean, the only really.
I'm going to show our viewers. These are the note cards. You can't really see it, but it is unbelievable.
Yeah, for the listeners, Eliana's holding up the phone with the actual note card phrases on the note cards.
You can read them. Yeah. And then she was dumb enough. Nobody told her, hey, we have your guide to the hearing that's stupid, but hey, maybe try not to just set them on the desk so that all the photographers can take pictures of them and mock you.
Yeah.
They left that part out.
I just think it's a fascinating look into who should be able to speak extemporaneously on matters of moral, legal, juridical moments relating to universities. University presidents. That's who should be able to do this without notes. They're not supposed to have to go and consult a lawyer to tell them how to answer questions about what universities should do. They're the experts on universities. They run universities. They've worked at universities their entire life, and they turn to some law firm that, bills them $1,000 an hour to write down sentimental nostrums on a piece of paper. And then when there's a follow-up question from Elise Stefanik or Virginia Fox, they freeze like deer in the headlights. They cannot, after they've said the thing that's on the card, there's this great SNL sketch with David Alan Grier. It's the morning show, and the teleprompters go out, and all the anchors and the weatherman and David Alan Grier is the weatherman are like, "Where are the words? Bring back the words. We don't know how to talk about this without the words." And then they basically, all three of them end up, going savage and Cro-Magnon and like killing each other on the set of the morning show because the teleprompters have gone down. That is sort of like what happened to the university presidents in front of Congress, whom they should be able to outwit and outsmart. Maybe not Elise Stefanik.
Except the teleprompters didn't go out in their case. They had the note cards.
No, but nobody even took
their prep away from them.
But they didn't have follow. You can't, by definition, have follow-up note cards because you don't know what question you're going to be asked in response to your blather. So.
But I mean,
in a certain way. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, I can't see you, Abe. There we go. Sorry.
I was just saying, they put themselves in this preposterous situation where they didn't want to indict themselves and the university, but they were more afraid of running afoul of the anti-Semites. So this was they needed all the help they could get to thread this absurd needle.
And they were right, because look what happened to Manoush. She went before Congress on the second occasion that she went before Congress. And while she was on Congress, while she was testifying, the encampments were being set up at Columbia to greet her after she got off the Acela and got on the subway to 116th Street.
Well, the need for the guidance and the note card and all that reflects the problems with academia that we saw in the testimony itself, which is that all four of us grew up constantly surrounded by liberals. We were familiar with their thinking, their arguments, how they respond to conservatives, and it made us both understand them and able to engage and argue and interact with them. The opposite is true in academia, where they all think the same, they swim in the same waters, and they're totally unable to engage, argue, converse with people who don't think like them. So when they go up to Capitol Hill and they meet a real live conservative, they need, special needs, handicapped,
they need accommodations. They need special accommodations. They need an extra half hour to answer each question.
Extra time, note cards, all the things.
It's absolutely true. Okay, let's move on to Harvard, because, of course, we always want to highlight Harvard. And there is a genuinely head-shaking decision that was reached by the same judge who found in a previous case, in a case brought by students, that Harvard had failed them in protecting their civil rights. Judge Stearns, who is 147 years old, by the way.
He's in his 80s.
He's in his 80s, and he was appointed by Millard Fillmore. to the judiciary. But he did 2 years ago find that Harvard failed its Jewish students. But in 2026, he finds that the federal suit against Harvard for its violations of Title VI rights should be thrown out, or that Harvard should win this case on the basis that the offenses caused were just so long ago, meaning a year and a half ago. And anyway, those incidents that are evoked by the federal government in its brief, I guess, or in its argument, were, quote, where is this? The court, without diminishing any concern arising from these occurrences, the court finds them singly and collectively to be too isolated and episodic to support a plausible inference that any institutionalized noncompliance with Title VI persists at Harvard to this day. So
he essentially says there's no ongoing discrimination for the court to remedy.
Right. That it's all solved. They fixed it.
Well, there's an irony here, which is that I'm not agreeing that it's solved, but there's an irony here in that there definitely has been an improvement in the overall atmosphere of what many of these administrations will tolerate. And the reason for that, even if it's marginal improvement, is the federal suits. In other words, Trump suing Harvard is what makes Harvard act better. So it's fun, for the judge to dismiss it, it's kind of funny, but it's like, it's still good that he's suing them because that's the only thing that changes their behavior. So he should just sue them again and again and let the judge keep dismissing it. But every time he sues them, they get slightly better. And eventually they might, have like a normal atmosphere again. But it's only this intervention, and it's only the threat of the suit and the threat of, having grant money taken away that has made any difference.
And
Congress's questioning.
And Israel won the war in Gaza. So remember that when this stuff was going on, the fight in Gaza was going on, and the effort by the people in the encampments was to interfere with and do whatever was possible to block Israel succeeding in its aims in Gaza by influencing the Biden administration and American public opinion to force Israel to a permanent ceasefire before it had completed its mission of saving the hostages and basically running Hamas into the ground and taking the territory necessary to prevent any reoccurrence of active firing hostilities between Israel and Gaza. And so without that mission, which was the true purpose of the encampments, whatever anti-Semitism takes place now is all going to be kind of incidental. It's not going to be organized. It'll be a professor doing X or somebody saying something to you Y if you're walking by with a kippah or something like that. There's nothing that organized. And it's interesting to point out that you might have thought that the Iran war, because this is, of course, it's campuses and they hate war, and the anti-war movement started on campus, and nuclear freeze movement, the war in Iraq leading to campus protests and all this. You might have thought that when we went to war on February 28th against Iran, there would be some activation of the campus protest movement here in 2026. And there was none. Because there was no purpose to it, because the outside organizers of this entire game, their game is the Gaza game, and their game is, they saw no particular merit or purpose in saying it's unjust for us to be at war with Iran. For whatever reason, they're Qataris and the Iranians are firing on them. I don't know what wouldn't have triggered it, but they simply weren't triggered because America took the lead in Israel. It wasn't just Israel doing its stuff on its own. So
and in that is the answer, right? Which is that they're not actually an anti-war movement at all.
They're an
Oh,
anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic movement. Abe, you were saying.
Yeah, when Seth says that things have gotten better because of Trump suing, I'm sure it's true, but it's so tremendously unsatisfying because I feel as if the problem is sort of at this point you can only treat it, you can't cure it. The institutions, the culture of them, the history of having inculcated that culture is so deep, so diffuse that there's no you will never there's no snapback to, oh, this is a nice leafy campus. It's what you think a college is.
Look, I've mentioned this before, but I mean, in the past 6 months, or in the first 6 months of the 25, this is the last 6 months of the 25-26 academic calendar year, I have two different friends who have two different kids at two different liberal arts colleges, both of whom were subject socially to extreme unpleasantness for being Jewish. And the people that she was going to live with wrote her a letter and said, we can no longer live with you because you're a Zionist. And the other had another student in class kind of pursuing her from class to class, attacking her. So the mass demonstrations are over, and the colleges themselves are going to be more careful organizationally, institutionally. But as Noah Rothman would say, the permission structure for ordinary day-to-day students on campus to behave in appalling and loathsome fashion toward their fellow Jewish students, that's the Pandora's box that was opened. That's the emotional game that now every Jewish kid at a college campus is going to have to play unless they're at Yeshiva University or the University of Austin. They're gonna or Hillsdale,
Florida.
and maybe, Florida or Texas.
Well, I think there's another. I think there's another one too, where these activists realized because of what the administration is doing, there was less room to operate on the campuses, but more room. Like we saw, the activism on the campuses hurt the Democrats in 2024. And so it actually moved into the political system. And so we see less activism on the campuses, but more in politics, where they're just running on what the activists are just running for office. And that's actually been successful with Trump in office. So Hamawi, I mean, what was that guy doing while he was in college? Dari Eliza Chevalier, she was one of these activists in college. Zohran Mamdani, he was one of these people, and he won. Abdul El-Sayed, he's a Columbia guy. He was one of these people. And it's actually just moved into Democratic politics, where now the price
and one
of
of
entry
Abdul's staffers was in that RICO
exactly
case.
Where the price of entry now is saying, I was a radical Israel-hating college activist, and that's my platform.
Yeah, it's like saying you heard a band 10 years before the band broke. I was SJP. I saw SJP open for the Flaming Lips. I mean, it's kind of got that quality to it. Like, I'm an OG here. I Zohran Mamdani was there on the leafy greens of Bowdoin, Bates, Colby, whatever nonsense Maine horseshit liberal arts school you might name out of all three of them. I can't remember which one he was on, but that's where he emerged as a political voice, as an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic activist with the most radical anti-Israel group on campus.
And half of them are Columbia. I mean, half of them are Columbia people.
Yeah.
Who came straight off
And
that campus. And then half the Mamdani administration is, there's, the Columbia guy, I forget his name now, who was harassing the dining hall to cut from its menu the Israeli wrap because it was a great offense against Palestinian students. And this one and that one. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure things are better. They've just
Right.
transmuted into a different place in the country.
Right.
well, I think people are going to learn to speak differently. That's what's going to be considered better, right? Take the Haverford case. The Haverford case, the students said that they were in a meeting with the diversity administrator, the DEI commandant, and brought this. By the way, this is the normal chain of complaint at a college. They brought their, objections to things that were happening in class to the diversity office, which is what they were supposed to do. The diversity officer told them that basically it was their turn. They said that the DEI officer said, well, it used to be, for a long time, black students felt uncomfortable and then gay students felt uncomfortable on campus. And so, you just sort of have to take your medicine. Like, that's a normal thing. And the other thing she said was that, you just have to keep your head down and call out genocide and denounce genocide. And that part really struck me because you wonder how many times a minority group has been told to fix what's wrong with it. Instead of protecting the minority group, it's like, well, all you have to do is not be baby killers. Can you not be baby killers? And then people will be nice to you on campus. Literally no other group has ever been spoken to this way by a DEI official. And I think the biggest change is going to be DEI officials realizing that they just can't open their mouths, but they're going to enforce more or less the same
Okay, so
policies.
let's move on then, because this gets to the third story, the Duke story. But I do think that what's important here is that there are, I believe now, two ethnicity is not the right. I don't even know how to describe it, but there are two types of kids to whom DEI officials either speak or send very clear messages of the sort you're talking about. That the problem is with you and not with us, that there's something you need to fix and not us, and that's Jews and Asians. Remember the material that was gleaned from the Harvard admissions process in the suit that overturned affirmative action. What was it? I can't hear you, Eliana, but
it's Students for Fair Admission.
Right, Students for Fair Admission. So when they discovered that these kind of this language that was being used to say that Asians should be admitted at far less at levels far less than they deserve based on actual numbers, were that there's something wrong with them. They're charmless. They don't have they put their heads down. They work too hard. They're not part of our community. We can't build the community that we want with them here. So somehow they're supposed to change their cultural mien to make them more acceptable. And of course, that's also a lie. They don't mean it. What they mean is they don't want Asians because if they pick Asians, those Asians will fill slots that they would rather give to other minorities and to legacies who may supply them with much needed dollars, in terms of alumni and family giving. So Duke.
It means they want to paint by numbers, by the numbers they want to achieve, by cherry picking from here, from there to create, the racial mix in the class that they think is correct. What the Department of Justice and Harmeet Dillon's Department of Civil Rights found at Duke essentially is that Duke invited students after the Students for Fair Admissions lawsuit that outlawed racial preferences to write an essay that told applicants to write about their race and how it's affected their life. Specifically, the exact terms on the application were they'd like to consider applicants' discussion of how race affected their life, and that it was a proxy for racial admissions. And they showed that in the 2024 class, the average admissions, not graduating class, the 2024 admittees, the average LSAT for Black students was 164. For Hispanic students, it was 170. For whites, it was 172. And for Asians, it was 173. And the delta between a 173 for the Asian students and 164 for the Black students is significant. Significant.
So I just think, so what we deduce from this is this effort, as you said, to figure out ways to get around the Supreme Court finding in the affirmative action case. And one of the reasons that this is happening is, I believe, though, Seth, you say DEI officials are going to find a new way to speak in a much more radical way than Eliana was saying about how we know how liberals speak, but they don't know how we speak. There is no other speak in admissions land. There is no other language. They're not using our language and then twisting it to their purposes. This is what they have bathed and marinated in for more than a quarter century. They're not just the ones who are putting their finger on the scale, or they're pushing the scale down to privilege one group against another and do it that way. They're the people who retired and taught them how to do this did it too a generation ago or more. They don't know how to do admissions.
Fairness is not translatable. There's no words for it in their language.
Right. They don't accept the basic idea that you should treat applicants to your school, all things being equal, as individuals with individual accomplishments, individual problems, individual strengths, and individual weaknesses. Because then you don't get the aggregate gross mass effect that you want, which is to change the nature of the American educated and upper middle class to make it look more like you think America should look. In those cases that we know where there is no effort, there can be no effort legally to skew the numbers. And the big test case here is the New York City SHSAT test for the 8 schools, the 8 academically distinguished high schools in the New York City public school system. The only way you get in is based on the score on this test. No grades, no recommendations, no name, no skin, no nothing. And when you do it that way, here in New York, you get a class of 800, 500 of them are Asian, and 9 of them are Black. And rather than saying the problem here is that we are bring these Black kids into our school system and we are warehousing them and teaching them nothing, and we're taking our days off and going on Zoom and treating them as though they cannot learn. Nothing's expected of them. They're in bad schools. Nobody fixes the schools. The results are that they hit 8th grade, illiterate and incapable of taking a test like this that will get them into the school that will lead them into this upper middle class. And that's the real result. That's what they're afraid of. What they know is that if they did what I'm talking about, and they went one by, as Glenn Lowry once put it, one by one from the inside out, what they would get would be a class that didn't look like the America that they want America to look like.
I think it's also worth noting, Aaron Sabarium at the Beacon had a phenomenal piece on a fellowship for law students that is illegal and changed its language to say, no, we're not for minorities. We're for socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And it now takes don't quote me on the numbers. I'm making this up. 99 black students and 1 white student. And he went in and looked at who are the black law students that this fellowship is taking. And to say these students are socioeconomically disadvantaged is a bastardization of that term. They are graduates. I think there's actually 58 students in the fellowship. It was 50% of the black students at Yale Law School, 50% of the black students at this other top law school. Well, who are they? They're graduates of the most elite boarding schools in the country, the children of plastic surgeons, the this, the that. They are the most privileged black students in the country. And the truth is, these people, you said it's not in their argot. They don't believe in equality. They believe in equity. They believe in a particular outcome that is based on skin color. They simply won't abide it because they don't believe in it. They believe in outcomes, not in a process.
And think of the logic of the DEI official at Haverford who said the thing to the Jewish students that, like, this is your turn to feel uncomfortable the way that, black kids or gay kids have felt uncomfortable. The whole issue with affirmative act, the whole issue with these sort of large-scale efforts to change outcomes or to change the constitution of things runs smack into the fact that a kid who is 17 years old today was born in the United States in 2009, and he didn't benefit from Jim Crow. He didn't benefit from, white privilege in the sense that, things were skewed favorably in X or Y direction. He's a kid living in America in the last 17 years, the same as every other kid, the same as every other black kid, the same as every other
By their
Asian.
logic,
Yeah.
he was a victim of anti-Asian hate during COVID.
Right.
But they don't actually believe that.
Yeah. And my point is that even when affirmative action was first being debated, affirmative action came about as a result of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, in which the idea was that institutions should take aggressive measures to locate and bring into their ambit qualified minority students who had otherwise been denied access to, elite institutions. While the Civil Rights Act explicitly forbade counting by race, quotas. But of course, the only way you can that was an interesting and diabolical problem that was posed to these institutions, which is they're supposed to go aggressively recruit. But how do they prove that they've aggressively recruited without actually having enough kids come onto campus so they can say, look, we recruited and we got these kids? As it turns out, in the case of minority groups, there are a certain number of kids who are going to be, cream of the crop. And there are 10 top schools in the country. And like the scholarship at Duke, they're going to get fought over. And they don't need special privileges, maybe aggressive recruitment so that they can be told, no, it's okay. I understand you're worried about leaving home. You live in Kansas City and we're in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're going to do what we can to make sure that you are comfortable away from your family and away from home. And we'll set you up with a mentor and we'll have people who invite you over for dinner and stuff like that to make it more comfortable. But in the world of admissions into the elite, however you slice it, it's a top layer. It's cream, right? It's a top layer. And then it turns out that there are all these schools, they're all supposed to do this. They're all supposed to, show that they can admit, have classes that look like America or something like that. And the only way to do that is to lower standards, because the 500 or 1,000 kids who are going to fit this category as somebody once told me, a professor at the University of Chicago Law School told me, every African American that we want, without question, that we would take, that we want to admit. And we're a top 5 law school, is going to go to Harvard or Stanford because they want that exact same kid. They want those exact same kids. They're all the same kids. And so, yeah, Duke is going to give them scholarships, because particularly when you get through college and you get to law school, you now have a real history of academic performance, and then you're going to want to have somebody who will get through 3 years of law school. And the best way to do that is to get the best students who have done well in college, and they're going to end up being overwhelmingly upper middle class. I finish my monologue here. I will tell a story about my own life. And I did fine. I don't care. But it was sociologically interesting to me. My first job in 1982 was I was a reporter researcher at Time magazine. And as it happens, in the years preceding the time that I was a reporter researcher at Time magazine, the reason I got that job, which is not usually a job that people get out of college, is that I had published a lot of freelance articles in existing publications. I had been the movie critic for the American Spectator. I'd written book reviews for the New Republic. I had published an essay and a short story in Harper's. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just explaining who I was. And I went to the University of Chicago. And the job that I could get at Time was as a part-time reporter researcher. And across the hall from me was a great guy, liked him very much, African-American guy, also graduated, also 22, also fresh out of college. Harvard. He had gone to Harvard. He had published one article in the Harvard Crimson. He was the son of a doctor. He lived in Riverdale, New York. His family had 2 or 3 times the income that my family had, although, of course, my family is very prominent. And he got a writing job. He was a staff writer. He was a full step ahead of me, above me in the pecking order. And again, look, these were the two things here. There was me with this history of publication in magazines, started my own magazine in college, and then this African-American guy who gotten into Harvard from a prominent family and had published one article and then got a writer's trial at Time and basically didn't make it there eventually. Like I said, nice guy. He's had a good career doing other stuff. But that's what this is. That's what it really is. It's not my dad, the son of a milkman, who outperforms, foreign-speaking parents, outperforms the kids in his public school, and then gets a full ride at Columbia in 1946, even though he was a Jew and even though there was a quota. Right? That was that story. This story is, as long as you are a certain type, your performance doesn't matter. And if you are another kind of type, your performance also doesn't matter, because it's not going to get you anywhere to do really well. Or it'll get you fine. You'll be fine. You'll go to some school, but you're probably not going to go to Harvard, or get that first job at a step up level. Anyway, so
I can do a brief recommendation if you want.
Please.
Okay. My recommendation is a documentary on Netflix called Mourinho, about a Portuguese soccer coach by the name of Jose Mourinho. My husband is a huge soccer fan. Huge. I tell him I don't even like to hear soccer in the background. I am not a soccer fan. And he said to me, "You are going to love this documentary." So if you don't like soccer, but you kind of want an entry point, I loved this documentary about this very handsome, very successful, elite soccer coach He is now the coach of Real Madrid, but he's been everywhere, at Chelsea, at Manchester United. And his psychology and the psychology that he used on the players, it is a really interesting look at soccer, at this guy, at the players that he managed. I really loved it. I cannot talk about the soccer of it, which I don't understand, but I just found it highly enjoyable. Multiple episodes and extremely entertaining.
So is this Ronaldinho? The one and only?
Jose Mourinho.
Okay. I can't find Jose Mourinho. I'm trying to find the
Netflix,
Yeah.
3 episodes.
Okay.
They're each about an hour.
Okay. Great. Again, okay.
It's just a tub.
Mourhinho.
Okay. Jose Mourinho. There we go. There's also a documentary at Netflix about Ronaldinho. This shows you how much I know about soccer also. Another
I know
Brazilian soccer.
nothing, literally nothing,
Okay.
and I've really, really enjoyed it. So if I can enjoy it,
Okay.
I think anybody can enjoy it. And my husband joked, I wake up in the middle of the night all the time, and yesterday morning he said to me, I heard you watching that in the middle of the night. So I've been doing it by myself, even without him.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm not going to watch it, but thank you so much. I am resisting soccer.
Not
I am going to
highbrow.
resist soccer. I can't, you're not going to do this to me. I'm resisting soccer. It's fine. Everyone can love soccer.
And I will continue to
Soccer can
resist it elsewhere,
overtake
but
other sports in America if necessary, but not on my watch.
No one hates it. No one hates it more than I do, I promise you. But
you hate all sports.
But I hate
and I also hate it.
soccer especially. Soccer is the sport of sports, and I mean that in a bad way. But I saw a soccer documentary that, John, you would watch. This is from 2025, called "The Last Guest of the Holloway Motel." It's about a British soccer star from the 70s who vanishes from England, from his family, separates from everyone, ends up over here running a motel in West Hollywood, and that motel is now closing down. And there were a lot of rumors about what happened to him and why, and what his story is, and his connection to his family, and this fills in all the blanks and then some. And I don't remember which streaming service I watched it on, but it's good because it has nothing to do with soccer.
Okay, tell me the name again, because I'm gonna
The Last Guest of the Holloway Motel.
Okay, so this is the service that we provide you. It is actually not available on a streaming service. I mean, you have to buy it, but right now it seems only to be on. You can buy it at Apple TV or Amazon Prime to rent. So it's not free to stream. But here you have it. Former Norwich.
Well, in the meantime, you can watch the Apple TV soccer documentary about a coach named Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Very inspiring story.
I so don't like soccer that I don't like Ted Lasso. That's how much I don't like.
And I so don't like optimism and happy things that I don't like Ted Lasso.
All right. So we have now expressed extreme negativity here, as is our wont. Although Eliana began positive and ended negative. So I think that is the perfect, in this recommendation section, that is the perfect Eliana place to be. So we're going to have a spate of special shows next week dedicated to our September issue of commentary, because we're going to be away. So these are not going to be news episodes. And we'll be back the following week. So I hope you guys have a wonderful third week of August without us, although we will be there for you every day with really good podcasts that are really interesting. But we'll be back live with you in the last week of August. So for Abe, Eliana, and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.